So today we're going to talk about protists. This is going to end out, part of ending out our biology lesson. And then we're going to be finishing biology for the rest of this week. It's a very brief lesson, but while we're talking and discussing, you're going to be filling in the blanks on your notes, as well as adding some extra information on your notes. But before we discuss protists, let's go through some of the things that we already discussed, and we can list it out into 6 kingdoms. Kingdoms is a classification of the order of living things, starting from the highest kingdom, meaning the most sophisticated, to the lowest kingdom, meaning the least sophisticated. Who knows the highest kingdom? Animal. Animal kingdom. And it is in Latin, animalia. Put the Latin word and then also put the English word, which would be animal. This is one of the words that could pop up as one of your 3. It is a Latin word that we've learned, as well as in our lesson. Not saying this will be one, but this is a possibility. Who knows the next order? Remember, animalia, the animal kingdom, is the highest order, meaning the most sophisticated. Who knows what could come next? What's another organism? The plant, which would be plantae. Put the Latin word and the English word. Plants are sophisticated, but not as sophisticated as animals. The next kingdom is the one that we're going to be discussing today, which is Protists, which is protozoa or protista. You'll hear me say protista, protozoan, protozoa, or protist. All means the same thing. The next kingdom is one that we're going to talk about starting tomorrow, but let's see if you guys can figure it out. It's not as sophisticated as animal, plant, or protista, but it is still an organism that we come in contact with maybe even on a daily basis. Nope, bugs are actually part of the animal kingdom. Not yet. Not yet. Grows on stuff. Fungi. Which is fungus. It can be pronounced fungi or fungi. I'm a fungi, he's a fungi, she's a fungi too. And we're going to talk, yes, and we're going to talk about that starting tomorrow. And then the last order, we talked about animal, we talked about plant, we're talking about protists today, we'll talk about fungi tomorrow. And the last 2 we've already discussed. And these are the least sophisticated, the lower level of the kingdom. Bacteria, but we had 2 types of bacteria. What were they? Nope, you probably want to get in your notes and exemplify high school students right now. And if your binders are on the floor or on the counter, that is not where they should be. They should be open, especially if you don't know something that I'm asking you that we've already discussed. Again, what you're looking for are the 2 types of bacteria that we talked about. Nope. Eubacteria and Archaebacteria. Those are going to be our last 2, but what order should they go in? Who could take a guess? Eubacteria you think goes first? Why? It is most common, but is it more sophisticated? No, they don't. They're all single-celled, meaning that how it can survive on its own, if it can survive on its own, what it can do. Like animal, we're very sophisticated because we can do just about everything on our own. Okay, eubacteria functions independently or archaebacteria? Archaebacteria is a little bit more sophisticated, not much more because it's still at the bottom of the kingdom than eubacteria. Eubacteria is more abundant, meaning that's practically everywhere. That's the most kind. Whenever we say bacteria, that's the one we're talking about. However, it falls at the bottom of the kingdom. But notice they're both at the bottom. You do need to know the 6 kingdoms, and you need to know their sophisticated level, so from order. Any questions? What kingdom do you belong to? Are you sure? So you are human? That's what you're telling me? And you want me to believe that? You got a 10. Where'd you go? Really? Got a 10, Danica. Any questions about this? Okay, then before we go on, let's take a short look at a short video that Tim and Moby is going to talk to us about protists. So we have just a little bit of an idea of what we're looking at and what we're going to be talking about in regards to protists.
That's quite a fashion statement, Moby. Dear Tim and Moby, what's a protist? From Denise. Well, lucky for us, Moby's brought us a few examples. Protists are single or multicelled organisms that live in moist or wet surroundings. They can be plant-like, animal-like, or fungus-like. All protists are eukaryotic, meaning their cells have a nucleus. Plant-like protists include the substance commonly known as algae. Algae have chlorophyll in their cells, which means they can manufacture their own food using light from the sun. These organisms have many cells and complement any fall wardrobe nicely. Other plant-like protists are single-celled. They propel themselves with tails called flagella and have an eye spot to detect light. Animal-like protists, like this here amoeba, are called protozoans. Protozoans are single-celled. They have special spaces called vacuoles for digesting food and getting rid of excess water. Because they don't make their own food, they must have a way to move to get it. There are 4 ways that protozoans move. Some use temporary extensions of their cytoplasm called pseudopods, meaning false foot. Others move using flagella. The most complex protozoans use cilia, which are little hairs that move it through the water. Some protozoans are parasites with no way of moving on their own. Instead, they live in and feed off of animals. Finally, we come to fungus-like protists. Slime molds live on the decaying remains of plants and animals. Pretty. Water molds and downy mildews also live on dead stuff, but some forms grow on living plants and animals, slowly devouring them. Hey, thanks for helping me explain protists, Moby. Well, I wouldn't go so far as to say that you were fabulous. You're not a supermodel.
Alright, so let's discuss what Tim and Moby has basically broken down for us, but we're going to break it down into notes fashion and kind of look at everything that they kind of talked to us about, but in more detail. So, first of all, protist comes from a Greek word. The Greek word is protozoan, and it means first animal. Again, that could be a word. Protists are made up of how many cells? Just one cell. But they have a control center called the nucleus, which makes them what type of cell? Eukaryotic. So this is very different than what we've talked about thus far for eukaryotic cells. We know that eukaryotic cells are what type of cellular? Multicellular. However, we have this funny looking thing called protists, which are unicellular, but it's eukaryotic, and the only reason why it's eukaryotic is because it has a nucleus. Any questions for this? Okay, then let's talk about protist traits. There's several traits that we're going to discuss, and some things you should be able to give me the answer to without me telling you. For instance, some protists make their own food. If they can make something, they must be called what? Producer. To produce means to make, so therefore it's a producer. If it's making its own food, it's going to use the process of what? Photosynthesis. Very good. So this type of protist will take on the characteristics of what? What things do we know make their own food? Plants. So it's going to take the characteristic of a plant. Another trait are some cannot make their own food, meaning they have to get it from other things, like us. We get stuff from other things, so therefore we take in things, which is called a what? A consumer. A consumer is also known as a heterotroph. So heterotrophs are protists that cannot make their own food, also known as a consumer. You do need to know what a heterotroph is, which is a consumer, meaning that it, so that it can't what? Can't make its own food. Very good. Your heterotrophs are going to depend on organic substances. The organic substances that it will depend on would be things like what? Plants, okay, but don't write that down yet. What else? Animals. What else? Water is not an organic. Organic means it's carbon-based. Possibly. So things like bacteria, yeast, and protists. Notice I said animal and plant, yes, because protists can take on plant characteristics as well as animal characteristics. So it's going to feed on other protists as well as bacteria and yeast to get its nutrition. Some break down dead organic matter for energy. To break it down must mean it's called a what? Decomposer. To decompose means to break down. So this would be a decomposer. Everyone with me? Good. Some are going to invade organisms, use them as hosts for nutrients. These would be what type of protists? Parasites. Or you can put your name there. We all agreed that you're parasites. Remember? We agreed. Remember? Remember we agreed? Yes. Yes. Yeah, we did agree. You feed on your hosts, which are your parents. We agreed. The difference between you and an actual parasite would be what? You don't do it to harm them. You do it intentionally. But you don't do it to harm them, so you're not parasites. Some can control their movement. So we have all these characteristics, and then some can control their movement. And you saw that in Tim and Moe's video, how some actually were able to control their movement. Any questions? Okay. Moving on then. Protists that cannot control their movement. We're going to call them fungus-like. So add that information next to your title where it says protists that cannot move. Add fungus-like. These are going to be your fungus-like protists. Your first one that we're going to talk about is spore-forming protists. These are parasitic. Notice that we're talking about what disease here? Malaria, because it's showing what biting who? A mosquito biting a human. The mosquito will actually be the what? Not the parasite. It's the vector carrying the parasite. And then it transmits it into the human. The actual parasite is a sporozoa, and it's called P. vivax. And your P. vivax causes malaria. The word got cut off here. But that should be malaria, and I think you already have that on your notes. But what you need to add is P. vivax, which is Plasmodium vivax. And another one, the sporozoa or the parasite would be Plasmodium sporozeles. Any questions about this? Another fungus-like protist that cannot control its movement would be water mold. Now, water mold is going to live in water, moist soil, or on other organisms. The first picture you see there is a dead fish, or fish, period. where the water mold is growing on the fish. The second picture that you see is someone's home, where the water mold is growing up the walls. Yeah, water can, if it sits there for a while or it gets on something, yes, it does. It can mold. How many of, if anyone's, well, hopefully you've never done this, but like in old houses or elderly people, if they have sheets that get wet, maybe from water being spilled on them or whatever the case may be, and you leave it sitting there, it's going to grow mold. If a house gets flooded, then what's going to grow? Mold, like you see in this picture here. If the toilet overflows, then what's going to grow? Mold, yes. A longer period of time, but for a long period of time, yes, it could. So we're going to talk about that. Any questions here? We will be bringing that up in a moment. Any other questions? Those are good. All right. And then the third type of fungus-like protist that cannot move would be slime mold. And these are found in cool, not cool like that's hip, that's what's up, cool like in temperature-wise, or moist places like in the woods. This is not a pretzel, and these are not jelly beans. Okay? It's slime mold. How many of you ever went camping or hiking? And you've ever left up a piece of wood or bark or anything, you may have saw something that looks like this. It will be slime mold. Why do we call it slime mold? Because it looks like slime, but it is mold. And it can be detrimental to your health. So don't pick at it. Okay? Just like mold in people's home, that can be detrimental to your health as well. Causes breathing issues. Any questions for this? Okay. All right, protist reproduction. Protists can produce asexually and sexually, or a combination of both. So they can either be asexual, they can be sexual, or they can start off asexual and end up sexual. So it can have a combination of both. If it produces asexually, what's that asexual reproduction that we learned with bacteria? Started with a B. And I probably should hear pages flipping right now. Yes, binary fission. So that's the way that protists are going to produce asexually. In bacteria, when it did the binary fission, it did not copy a nucleus. Why? There is not one. However, in protists, it is going to copy the nucleus. The reason why it can use binary fission, which is a very fast reproduction method, is because it doesn't have all the organelles. So it can produce really quickly in that matter. Any questions for this? And we watched the video how bacteria reproduce rapidly and rapidly and rapidly. Same way that protists are going to reproduce. Sexual reproduction is going to combine what type of material? What type of material is combined when things, what is DNA? What type of material is that? Genetic material. Very good. Don't turn your paper yet. Don't turn your paper over yet. At the bottom of your notes, I want you to write this. Protists are classified into 3 main groups. And then you're going to put 3 bullets for those 3 main groups. One we've already talked about. What's that one group? Fungus-like. What do you think the other 2 groups are? Flip your paper over and look. So one group would be fungus-like, and you're just putting bullets. You have your plant-like, and then you have your animal-like. We've already talked about the fungus-like. Now we're going to talk about the animal and the plant-like. We're going to start with the animal-like. And as we watch the short video, you are going to be filling in information on your sheet. Notice it says you're going to be looking at an amoeba. You're going to draw it, label, and name the functions, meaning what is the purpose for that part. Flagellate. And I think on your paper it says flagellate. Fix that. It should say Flagellates. Draw and label and name the function. Then you have the ciliates, and then sporozoa. So while you're watching the video, you're going to be doing those things.
Well, these are the little suckers that made me sick last month. Dear Tim and Moby, what exactly is a protozoan? From Danforth. Protozoa are members of the Protist kingdom. Protists are single or multi-celled organisms that live in moist or wet surroundings. They can be plant-like, animal-like, or fungus-like. Protozoa are the animal-like protists. They're all eukaryotic, meaning their cells have a nucleus. Most species are found in water, including oceans, lakes, rivers, and ponds. But they also live in the soil and inside larger organisms, both living and dead. They may be tiny little things, but protozoa have a big effect on the ecosystem. Some are parasites, meaning they live inside host organisms without providing any benefit, and in some cases, even harming the host. Others live inside animals in symbiosis. They actually help the host. Protozoa also control the Earth's population of bacteria, which many of them eat. Oh, they don't really have digestive systems, at least the way we do. Protozoa have special spaces called vacuoles for digesting food and getting rid of excess water. Scientists have divided protozoa into 4 categories based on how they move. Amoeboids use temporary extensions of their cytoplasm called pseudopods, meaning false foot. They also use the pseudopod to eat. It surrounds the food and engulfs it. Once the food's trapped inside, a vacuole forms around it, and it's digested. Many amoeboids live inside exoskeletons made of calcium carbonate. When they die, they often leave these skeletons behind, like shells. Flagellates move using a flagellum, which is a little whip-like tail. Because flagella only work in a liquid environment, most species of flagellates live in the water. Some flagellates use their flagella to bring in food. Ciliates move with cilia, which are tiny hairs. Like flagella, cilia work best in liquid. Ciliates are the most complex protozoans. They have 2 nuclei, the micronucleus and the macronucleus. The macronucleus controls the day-to-day functions of the cell, and the micronucleus controls reproduction. Some ciliates live in symbiosis with cows and other grazing animals, helping them digest the grass they eat. Sporozoa are parasitic, with no way of moving on their own for most of their lives. Malaria, which kills millions of people every year, is caused by a sporozoan that's spread through mosquito bites. Well, no, I don't think that sporozoa are actually evil. That's just what they've evolved to do. I am not defending them.
All right, let's go over what it is that you just looked at. Who wants to come up and draw the amoeba? Nobody wants to come up and draw an amoeba? Do I have to pick somebody? You should be able to still draw it. You have a memory. It was a cartoon. Come on, Dave. Uh-oh, sorry. 1 second. I'm sorry, Dave. Yeah, go ahead and label it. Okay, stop for a second. That is the false foot, but what's the other name for it? Pseudopod. Pseudo. You don't have to write it, Dave. Big. Pseudo. D-O-P-O-D, pseudopod. Pseudo means false. We've already had that word with Greek, so therefore that could pop up as one of your extra words. One of those circles would be what? You don't need to label it. We're going to just talk about it. Yes, thank you. One of those circles would be what? The nucleus, which would be in charge of what? What is the nucleus in charge of? No. Controlling the cell. Very good. The other circle would be a what? A vacuole, which would be responsible for digestion. What are the pseudopods in charge of? Movement and bringing in food. Movement and bringing in food. Who wants to draw a flagellate? Again, this should be a G. A flagellate. This one was simple. Come on, Francis. Okay. What's that circle thing in the middle? The nucleus. What is it responsible for? Control. What's that tail-like thing? Flagellum. What is it responsible for? Movement and bringing in food. Very good. Thank you. And lastly, well, not lastly, but one of the last, who can draw a ciliate? No one? Come on, Tim. We can draw a little bit better than that. It really looks like it. Tim, erase that. That's not really what it looks like. It really looks like a what? Like a footprint or a slipper print. Give it that. Look at that. Oh, you're not finished.
Oh, I didn't get the rest. I didn't label it.
Oh, well, you start doing something.
I did the.
Do it. Mine looks much better. Tim messed me up. What are these little things that Tim are drawing? Cilia. You're not done. Stay there. Cilia. What are the cilia for? Movement. Good. What else do, just label it, C-I-L-I-A. What else does the ciliate have? An example of a ciliate would be a paramecium. What else does it have? It has a micronucleus, which is be little or big? Little. Give it a little what? Circle. You can make it a little bit bigger. Oh, okay, because we also have other circles in there called. Draw that a little bit bigger. There we go. That would be your micronucleus, which is responsible for reproduction. Micro, small. Smaller things in life, which is reproduction. Just put repro. Yeah, that's fine. Repro. Yeah, that's good. And then you also have a what? Macronucleus, which would be a little bit bigger. Okay? And that's responsible for control everyday functions. This would be your macro. And we really should be labeling them micro and macro, but okay. Smaller ones, micronucleus, larger ones, macro. We have some other circles in there. What are those? Draw it. And you don't have to color it in. Just draw one. There's going to be a bunch whenever it does stuff, but we're just going to draw one. And vacuoles are responsible for digestion. Good. And then the sporozoa. Who can draw us a sporozoa? That was the simplest of them all. No one? Really? That's it. That's your sporozoa. There were a bunch of them. You probably drew a bunch of them, but that's just one sporozoa, and that's fine. If you drew a bunch, that's fine. How do they travel and live? Can they travel on their own? No, so how do they travel? They attach to a what? To a host. And they live off of the host, and that's how they move. Any questions for this? So let me show you just a little short video on paramecium and how it actually moves. This would be a ciliate. Notice up here, this is a contractual vacuole. It keeps opening and closing for digestion. Everyone see that? And there's one down here as well. All right. So now we are going to look at plant-like. And on your notes, you have where it says plant-like, and we're going to go back here. Still up. And as you're watching the video again, you should be filling in your blank.
Man, it's hot. Ooh, nice. Dear Tim and Moby, what are those little green plants that cover ponds in the spring and summer? From H.I. You're probably talking about algae. Algae are not plants, though. They're plant-like organisms, but they don't have roots, stems, or leaves like real plants do. Most algae are eukaryotic, meaning their cells have nuclei. Algae cells contain a green pigment called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll lets them create their own food through photosynthesis, just like a plant. Because photosynthesis produces oxygen, algae are an important source of the air we breathe. Tiny algae called phytoplankton form the basis of most saltwater food chains. It's safe to say that without algae, the world would be a much tougher place to live. Algae are divided into a bunch of different categories, including green algae, which is the most common type, with thousands of different species. It may not look like much, but almost half of our oxygen comes from green algae. Red algae have chlorophyll in their cells, but they have a red pigment too, which helps them absorb sunlight from deep in the ocean, where many of them live. Most brown algae live in the ocean too, and include different types of seaweed and kelp. You may be eating red and brown algae without even realizing it. Carrageenan, a substance found in red algae, makes everything from pudding to toothpaste nice and smooth. Red, green, and brown algae include both single and many-celled species. But euglenoids, diatoms, and dinoflagellates are all single-celled. Some of these organisms are pretty weird. Euglenoids often have animal-like features, including whip-like flagella and eye spots that are sensitive to light.
And draw that. You should be drawing that. Make sure that you're labeling and drawing it.
The cell walls of diatoms, or gold-brown algae, are rich in silica, the main element in glass. And dinoflagellates have special flagella that make them spin in circles.
Go ahead and draw the dinoflagellate. Looks like an acorn. All right, here is your dinoflagellate. It kind of looks like an acorn or a walnut. Make sure that you draw the one flagella. And then the other one that's here. And this is the special one used for
glass.
nope. That's what we just don't see it. All right, so let's review what we've gotten from that video. What are the green algae's benefits to humans? Sham. Oxygen. What are red algae's benefits to humans? Aaliyah. Like what? Putting in toothpaste. That would be agar is actually in our ice cream, and they didn't mention that on there. Agar is what we put at the bottom of our petri dish for our bacteria to feed on. That is also what's put in our ice cream to give it its consistency. The thing that Tim and Moby mentioned to us was carrageenan. Carrageenan is in our toothpaste and our pudding to make it nice and smooth. That all comes from red algae. Scientists. Probably testing it out to see how they can use it. Inventions. Some inventions, remember, are made by accident. Brown algae is included in different types of blank and blank. Seaweed and kelp. Who wants to draw for us a euglenoid? Draw and label a euglenoid. Come on, JD. What's that flagellum used for? Move around. Anything else? Is the flagellum used for anything else? Thank you. Is it used to bring in food? Is this flagellum used to bring in food? Yes? Raise your hand if you say yes. Raise your hand if you say no. Why no? What category are we under? But what category are we under for this side of our notes? Plant-like. So why no? Why is it not used to bring in food? Aaliyah? Because it makes its own food through the process of photosynthesis. Very good, Aaliyah. All right. Diatoms are rich in silica, which is our main element in what? Glass. And who wants to draw a dinoflagellate? It's not hard at all. Who wants to draw a dinoflagellate? Take a shot at it. Just put it right there. Just put it right there. Who wants to draw a dinoflagellate? Francis, come on, give it another shot. Got Picasso at work now. Oh, God. He's like a baseball cat. His hand did the wrong thing. Never mind. He was just testing your knowledge. It's for real this time. That's closer. There we go. Oh, okay. He just drew a hat again, but.
The chin.
Oh.
Like.
Oh.
Because that's how I looked on the cards. That's not what I was told. Like, yeah, it looked like a mouth. You see the mouth? The mouth on the front?
This is a what? It also had one there, which is also a flagellum. So it has a special what? Flagellum or flagellate, which makes them spin. It was spinning around. Any questions for this? Okay, then this would conclude your lesson.